Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time it is a review of the 2018 biopic Bohemian Rhapsody. Now, Bohemian Rhapsody, if you ask me, this is the Queen biopic for the Hot Topic crowd. This is the Queen biopic for the Queen fans who only know of the greatest hits and know the bare minimum about their story and about Freddie Mercury himself. And I know there are a lot of fans out there that really like this movie, and to each their own. I don't have any issue with that. I think that's great because different opinions are what makes this world interesting. But I personally felt this was one of the most overrated films I've seen in recent memory. I thought it was incredibly disappointing and at times infuriating. So, this is a movie where I probably will have some pauses in between to collect my thoughts because I have a lot of things I want to say about this movie, and I want to make sure I get them all out on camera. So it's directed by Bryan Singer, and Bryan Singer left the production before the film was finished because he's a scumbag. I'm just going to leave it at that. And then he was replaced by Dexter Fletcher, who did the majority of the movie. I don't know how much of the film Dexter Fletcher directed. I personally feel Dexter Fletcher should have directed the movie. After seeing what he did with Rocket Man, where he combined music and film in such a magical way, I really feel that this film could have used that. I personally felt Singer's direction was competent, but it wasn't anything really that spectacular. The moments where he's reenacting or shooting reenactments of live band performances, there's life and there's energy to them, and they're well shot. But everything else seems to be really stock and standard and kind of bland, if you ask me, in terms of the direction. A little bit lifeless. And I do admit that from a technical standpoint, the film is fairly impressive. I give the film a lot of props and a lot of credit for its sound design, for the editing by John Ottman, for the cinematography by Newton Thomas Sigel. I definitely feel that all of the technical aspects of the film, from the art direction to the costume design to the production design, is all top notch. And I also felt that there were a good amount of performances in the film that were solid. Rami Malek, I thought he was okay. I thought he was decent. I am still baffled as to why he won the Oscar for Best Actor for this performance. Can somebody please tell me why he deserved the Best Actor award for this? Because I don't get it. Other than one scene in the rain, his acting was okay. It wasn't Oscar worthy. He played a facsimile of Freddie Mercury, and he lip synced. That's really what he did. He played a facsimile of Freddie, he cosplayed Freddie Mercury, and he lip synced to Freddie Mercury's vocals. And he had a few scenes where he was being dramatic, but he didn't really manage to capture the same house on fire, mercurial energy that Freddie Mercury had. And he just came across as rather meek to me, which is the complete opposite of Freddie. At least his on-stage persona, or his persona when he's partying it up and he's being, the king of debauchery. But, that's because with that particular aspect, all of the grit and the reality from the story is scrubbed away because Roger Taylor and Brian May didn't like the original concept. See, I was really into this film when it was originally announced, because when this was originally announced, it was going to be rated R, it was going to be gritty, it was going to be realistic, it was going to be a no-holds-barred, somewhat ruthless take on Queen and Freddie Mercury, the life of the band and of the man. And it was not going to pull any punches. It was going to show Freddie's the height of his debauchery. It was going to not shy away from his sexuality. It was going to talk about the rise of the band and all the different uh, bumps in the road afterwards, and it was going to deal with Freddie's battle with AIDS, and it was something that I always felt would make a spectacular film. I always felt that this story, especially the story of Freddie Mercury, could make for an amazing movie if it was done right. So I was on board with it. Sacha Baron Cohen was in the same boat because he really liked the concept and he was very passionate about it, and he signed on to play Freddie Mercury because of that. And then Brian Taylor and Roger May got a hold of the script and didn't like how dark and realistic it was, and decided to scrub it clean and turn it into a cookie cutter biopic so everybody could go home smiling and feeling good about themselves. And that's fine, but that's just generic. So they took a Queen biopic that was going to be anything but generic and made it into one of the most generic biopics that I've seen in years. And that's a damn shame. But, I don't blame Rami Malek for that, because that's probably what he was asked to do. Lucy Boynton, I think she did a good job as Mary Austin, his girlfriend. Gwilym Lee, Ben Hardy, Joe Mazzello, they also did good jobs with their performances as the other members of the band. It was fun to see Mike Myers again. It's Ray Foster, but his performance wasn't really that great. Really came across as him playing a character. It was almost like he was doing another SNL skit from back in the 90s. And I get why he's there, because that way they can make a meta reference to Wayne's World, but still, it just wasn't that great of a performance. And there were some other actors and actresses that did solid jobs as well. I mean, Aaron McCusker as Jim Hutton is one that I definitely want to mention. But there really wasn't anyone in the film in terms of the performance that was amazing or great. They were there. They were good, but they weren't great. Nobody was great in this movie when it comes to their performance. And Rami Malek definitely wasn't so good that he deserved an Oscar. I still don't get that. But the film's biggest problem, and the biggest thorn in my side personally when it comes to Bohemian Rhapsody, is the screenplay by Anthony McCarten. Now, Anthony McCarten seems to be really defensive over the film, and it seems like a lot of people involved with it are really defensive about this. Critics come out and point out how generic and bland and forgettable the movie is, and they come out with, "Oh, you're just a bunch of snobs." And I'm like, all right, call me a snob then, because if this is me being a snob, I'm going to be a snob, because this is Queen we're talking about. One of the biggest and most memorable and iconic rock bands in all of music history. This is Freddie Mercury we're talking about. One of the most iconic frontmen to ever step and sing on the stage. And you have a film that has all the impact, resonance, and staying power of a original movie for VH1. That's just not... This band and Freddie Mercury deserve a film that is as large and as big and as amazing as they are. And this just is not it. And the big reason for it is this screenplay. And McCarty, he was asked about this. McCarten, my bad. So McCarten was asked about this, and this is his response, because the film did get some criticism for its inaccuracies, and rightfully so. This film is so rife with inaccuracies that it really cripples the film, at least for me personally, because these inaccuracies are all at crucial plot points. The plot points that hinge this story together in this movie are a bunch of bullshit. And when they're a bunch of bullshit, it just makes everything just turn to shit. It can look pretty, it can have nice visuals, some solid performances, all the other technical aspects of the production can be on point, but if the story is so full of shit, it doesn't matter. And that's really what happens here. And McCartan, he gets all defensive and he says, this was for dramatic effect, which is the oldest and laziest excuse in the book for lazy screenwriting. And then he comes back with another lazy excuse. We're making a movie here, not a documentary. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. I didn't know that you were making a movie and not a documentary on Queen. But you know what you aren't making? You aren't making a rock and roll fantasy. You're not making a musical fantasy like Elton John's Rocket Man. If you ask me, that's really what they should have done. Because that would have made this film feel a little bit less stale, that's for sure. Definitely would have made the visuals more eye-catching and really added an extra dynamic to Queen's music other than just, hey, here's Queen's music, here's some reenactments of their live performances that are nowhere near as memorable, and then, why don't you just sing along? Because that seems like that's just, I think there even is like a sing-along extra on this Blu-ray, so you can sing along with the Queen songs, do some Queen karaoke. That just shows how empty this movie is. And you're making a biopic. You're not making a rock and roll fantasy. So when you have so many inaccuracies to what happened in real life that are not as good as what happened in real life and nowhere near as compelling as what actually occurred, then you deserve all the criticism. And then some. And I'm going to keep giving it to you, Andrew. Your script sucked. Then get all defensive and butthurt about it. But if you ask me, my truth and how I feel is that this script sucked. And the reason why is because all of these crucial plot points were made up and not as effective as what actually happened. There was even stuff that was left out, and I'll get to that later. So I'm just going to go through these inaccuracies. The ones that come to mind. Not all of them, but the ones that come to mind. So they have this whole relationship on film with Freddie Mercury and his girlfriend. And the film tries to act as if the two of them broke up. Freddie and Mary broke up. Never happened. Never happened at all in real life. That is just a construct that Andrew came up with to squeeze Queen and Freddie's story into this generic mold of a typical biopic about a rock band. That's really what it is. And it's a shame because that's the heart of this movie. And it's soulless because it's not real. It never happened. The heart of the film is their relationship and them breaking up and them finding a way to be back together or friends with one another in some capacity by the end of the movie. And it is bullshit. Another crucial plot point that's bullshit is how the AIDS diagnosis is handled. Freddie did not get AIDS before Live Aid. It just seems like they just wrote that because it's convenient and, oh, isn't that a cool idea that, oh, we got AIDS before Live Aid and Live Aid's about AIDS, and I'm like, no, it's not a cool idea because it's dumb. It's so it's so cookie cutter and so cliche. It's just one of those things. It's like it's too good to be true, and that's the case. It's too good to be true because it isn't true. And if that isn't bad enough, the whole Live Aid drama is bullshit too. The band never broke up. Freddie did not leave the band to do a solo album before Live Aid. They canceled tours so they could be in Live Aid. There was none of this last minute, can we be in Live Aid shit. That never happened either. They were on the card from the start. And Freddie wasn't even the first band member to go off and do a solo album. Every other member of the band did a solo project before Freddie Mercury did, with Mr. Bad Guy. And on the Mr. Bad Guy album, there were band members from Queen who worked on it. So this whole drama about Freddie leaving the band is bullshit. This whole drama about Freddie breaking up with his girlfriend is bullshit. Then you have stuff that they leave out that doesn't make any sense. Like, for instance, at the Live Aid performance, I think everyone got 15 minutes, and I could be wrong, it could have been 10, but the truth of the matter is this. Queen rocked the house so hard that they got an encore. This movie doesn't show the encore. What? Like, if you're trying to show in a cinematic way how epic and how cool and how amazing this performance was and how great Queen was at Live Aid, why would you leave that out? And no, there's no proof that there was no donations or anything until Queen came on. That's also bullshit. And another thing that's bullshit is the film ends as if the band reached the peak of their career at Live Aid. They did Live Aid, and then they faded off into obscurity, and Freddie Mercury died a few years later of AIDS. That's not what happened at all. Queen had other albums afterwards. They had other hit songs. Freddie Mercury persevered in the face of death with his vocals for The Show Must Go On. This is such an egregious mistake to leave this out. And I understand why they did it. Because they wanted to make people feel happy. They didn't want people to be sad. But you know what? By leaving this out, you took away the film's ability to reach on a deeper level, to actually resonate with people on a deeper level that isn't so superficial. Because this story, folks, is true. Freddie Mercury was on death's door. He was skeletal. He was in a lot of pain. AIDS was riddling and just destroying his body. He came into the recording studio to do the vocals for The Show Must Go On. And his bandmates were telling me he doesn't have to do it. And he said, no, I'm going to do it. He downed some vodka and then delivered some of the most powerful and moving vocals of his career. And if that isn't inspirational, I don't know what is. He sang in the face of death. He showed that even while his body was failing him, his spirit was as strong as ever. And they don't have that in here. That's nowhere to be found in this movie. Because Brian May and Roger Taylor didn't want to make you feel sad. They didn't want to have you feel the reality of the situation, of what AIDS does to people and what it did to Freddie Mercury. They didn't want to show his triumph over AIDS. Because he still lived on. AIDS was riddling him and destroying him, and he stood there and sang defiantly in its face, nope, not in the movie, because we don't want to make people feel sad as they come out of the theater. but you also, I guess, you don't want people to feel anything. And it's too bad. Because that's real. That's real drama. It's a real story, folks. It's not made up. It's not bullshit. That actually happened. So you can see why I'm irritated, frustrated to say the least, about this screenplay, about this story. And there are other aspects of it that are just bullshit as well. I mean, of course, the whole thing about the HIV diagnosis that I mentioned earlier. He gets diagnosed with HIV and AIDS after Live Aid. And then you have the whole way that it portrays his sexuality. And this was really insulting, to be honest. They tiptoed around his sexuality. They focused more on his relationship with his girlfriend than anything else. Yeah, his relationship with Mary. Jim is only in the film for a little bit. He should have been in the movie a lot more because he and Freddie were really close with one another in a multitude of different ways. And the film just tiptoes around his sexuality, has some moments where he, holds hands with a man, or there's some moments where he might kiss a man briefly. But the way that it portrays his bisexuality, especially his attraction to men, is so tone deaf that it's insulting. It just completely misses the boat entirely. I mean, it's one of those things where it even goes as far to delve into stereotypes, like him eyeing some guy at a truck stop bathroom, staring at his ass while he's on the phone. There's even another scene where it's insinuated as if he's stalking a gay man at a gay bar. And then what makes all of this even worse is this aspect of the story and the script that tries to insinuate that Freddie Mercury is conflicted with his attraction to men. That this is something that's an inner conflict with Freddie. And that is completely untrue and more bullshit. Freddie Mercury was one of the most confident men ever when it came to being in love with women or in love with men. Like, there was no conflict whatsoever when it comes to Freddie and his sexuality. But I guess to Andrew, well, that's boring. We got to add some drama to that. But you don't have to do that, because this drama is old and stale. So, and it doesn't help either that, like, you just don't, as the film goes on, you start losing more and more interest in things, because you start picking up on how bullshit everything is in terms of the most crucial plot points of the movie. And then you're just left with, oh, cool, there's a nice little reenactment of one of my favorite songs. No mention of Flash Gordon, the only soundtrack the Queen ever did the entire soundtrack for. But okay, alright, I get it's a cult movie. You don't want to mention Flash Gordon, fine. I'll give that a pass. They sing some songs out of order, or they say that certain things happen at a time that they didn't. That stuff I can deal with. But, like, the whole way that they handled the AIDS diagnosis, the whole way that they handled Freddie's sexuality, the whole way they handled his relationship with his girlfriend and his relationship with Jim, no, I can't deal with that. And the whole band breakup drama, no. And leaving out The Show Must Go On, the song isn't even in the movie! From what I remember. I don't remember hearing The Show Must Go On once in the entire film. And you would think that's just, like, if you're going to make a Queen biopic about the life and the death of Freddie Mercury, Like, you would be like, oh yeah, the show must go on, it's definitely going to be in there. It isn't. At least not in a capacity where it rings in your memory. And all of these inaccuracies and all this bullshit just makes a film that already feels overlong boring. It's a boring film to me because all of the plot the plot aspects and the dynamic of the plot is so full of shit, and I know it's so full of shit that I'm not interested in any of it. And it doesn't take a intriguing path to tell these stories. It doesn't do anything unique with it like Rocket Man did, where you have Elton John playing Crocodile Rock at the Troubadour, and that didn't happen, but you're okay with it because you have amazing visuals, like everyone in the audience floating in the air. There's nothing like that here. I think this would have been a great film to have some fantasy visuals. Like, if you actually showed Freddie Mercury dying of AIDS and wasting away, but still belting out the vocals for Show Must Go On, and then have like a sequence where, okay, there's his funeral, and then his skeleton pops out of the coffin, and it's animated or something, and then he's still singing "The Show Must Go On," and then the skeleton reanimates and floats in the air, and it's as if he's going to heaven, and it's a stylistic approach, and I think that'd be really cool. But no, we don't want to do that. We want to have a cookie cutter, play it safe biopic for the Hot Topic crowd. That's really what and it was huge. It was a huge success. It made over $900 million. It was an enormous success in the box office. A lot of critics loved it. But to me, it was a failure. To me, this film was a failure because it failed the band and it failed Freddie Mercury. I mean, every inch a classic, my ass. This is not what I would call a classic film or a classic biopic. I really do feel that Queen and Freddie Mercury, or just Freddie Mercury, they deserve their own miniseries. I mean, you could call the Freddie Mercury series iconic. The Freddie Mercury story. And or something like Mercurial or something. Like, I actually would be really curious about that. I want to see the real story, because the real story is so much more interesting. And if you don't know the real story, folks, do yourself a favor, do some research, read some books, read some articles, watch a documentary, find the real story, because this story pales in comparison to the real thing. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about Bohemian Rhapsody. I've ranted my head off enough already. I've pretty much gone through and went through all the points I wanted to make in regards to the film and my personal issues with it, with its overall story and its inaccuracies and so on and so forth. And I don't know what else to say except if I were to rate it out of 5 stars. I would give Bohemian Rhapsody 2 out of 5 stars. I give it that for its production values, for some of the performances. I do have to admit, early on, when the band is starting and when they're working on Bohemian Rhapsody, it did have me interested and engaged. But after that, when all of the bullshit just started to spew all over the screen and I started to smell it, that's when it just completely fell off a cliff for me. But yeah, that's just my personal feelings and views on Bohemian Rhapsody. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I will see you later. See ya.